I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
I'm sure many of you have seen this new VScript prop hunt mode that's popped up on the workshop. You know, just in time for Christmas. Remember what I said in my last video? Also, hey, when did TF2 become Garry's mod? Because what's next? Jailbreak? Roleplay servers? Prop hunt? Well, we already have prop hunt. Well, by God, here it is. Someone squirted this out as if though on cue. And before I tear this new asshole, I thought that I should at least try it out to see how it holds up. In my true, objective opinion, after playing prop hunt for about an hour, this new game mode is laughably terrible. And now why is that? Given the fact that this version of prop hunt is designed for casual mode via VScript, you cannot restrict players to a single class, which community server versions of prop hunt do by locking the hunters to pyro and the hiders to scout. This prevents anyone from engaging with inherent game mechanics that can break prop hunt, and puts everyone on the same playing field in terms of weapons, health, and abilities. This VScript version does not do that, because it can't. You can't turn off classes in casual mode or force everyone to be the same class. So, Engineer still has his sentries, which lock onto any players in the room, effectively acting like an aimbot to find anybody who's hiding. All you have to do is move a mini sentry from room to room, and boom, the game is over. Ammo scarcity is also completely negated by his dispenser. You still have the medic and all of his healing resources, which completely negate the caution behind prop checking. For those of you unfamiliar with classic versions of prop hunt, you take damage after shooting a prop that isn't a player. If this wasn't in place, the hunters could shoot indefinitely without punishment, and the props would always lose. But that doesn't matter here, because the medic can just negate that by healing everybody. And then you have Air Blast, which knocks props around without pyro taking damage. And then you have the Soldier and Demo Man with their AoE, who can carpet bomb an entire room with a medic up their ass and kill everyone who's hiding. And then you have these weird gimmicky abilities held by the props depending on what class you're playing, and they're mostly useless. Another problem, the props' collision holes are the same size no matter what prop you are, and they are the same default size as the mercenaries, which I do not think can be changed by VScript. So you can't even hide properly as many props, especially the smaller ones, because they just jut out from the walls and stick out like a sore thumb. And at the end of the day, prop hunt is still arena mode. You stand still for 3 minutes to then die and then wait for 3 more. This is why arena versions of this game are overwhelmingly unpopular, unless you give dead players something to do, like with Graveyard, where they can heal players after they die. That is a wonderful implementation of custom coding to breathe new life into an otherwise lackluster game mode. All of these inexcusable oversights, on top of a slew of other bugs and exploits, show that this VScript prop hunt was rushed and pathetically underplay tested. Did they not play the original community server versions and understand why it had the restrictions it did? Did they not foresee any of these problems? Obviously not. They didn't care. They rushed out 6 new maps, launching them all within 24 hours of each other, all by mostly the same people. This was done with the obvious intention to flood the workshop with new maps, some of them Christmas and winter themed, so Eric Smith takes notice and throws them in as the new game mode for Smithmas. 4 of the new maps are either reskins or just reworks of existing maps, and only 2 are original. Come on, this is fucked up. I also understand that this game mode is still technically in development, but you don't push out a new game mode with the very clear intention of it being added for Smithmas in a month without hammering out the major problems first. We see what happens when you don't do that, especially with zombie infection. All of Prop Hunt's issues show another glaring problem, and what I thought was an obvious observation. TF2 is not Prop Hunt. TF2 is not a game engine or a sandbox. It was not built to handle game modes that turn TF2 into a different game. This can only be achieved by serious modifications, and at that point, it's no longer TF2. And what's alarming to me is that many people, even huge names in this fucking sphere, think that this VScript prop hunt mode is perfectly fine for casual. It's not! Even if all these problems are fixed, prop hunt should never be allowed into the vanilla game. We want to play TF2. We don't want to play minigames. If you're making a new game mode for TF2, whatever game mode you make should at least loosely resemble the vanilla game, and not be a different game entirely. Not just from the standpoint of it being tonally appropriate, but just so it's functional. You know, TF2, where you have two teams of mercenaries fighting over territory using their innate abilities and weapons, you can't strip all that away and play hide and seek as a fucking cardboard box and still call that TF2. I mean, obviously you can, but it's a farce. Prop Hunt is fine on community servers, because that's where players can make and do whatever the fuck they want, and it's been a staple there for years. Well, it's been long since dead, actually, because it's not popular anymore. And just because a popular mod or game mode functions on community servers, that doesn't mean that it's appropriate for the vanilla game, especially when it turns TF2 into another game entirely. Just because a game can be molded and warped like Play-Doh to resemble something else, that doesn't change its purpose. You can pound on a nail with a loaf of bread, eventually that nail's gonna go in, but that doesn't make a loaf of bread a fucking hammer. For example, Prop Hunt isn't officially in Counter-Strike, because Counter-Strike is already its own specific game experience, with game modes that are appropriately tailored for what the game tries to be. Sure, you can mod the game to handle Prop Hunt, but that doesn't automatically make it appropriate. If you cram in random junk like minigames, you dilute the game into something it isn't, and turn it into this shitty carnival void of reason, direction, or purpose. Counter-Strike was not made to be Prop Hunt, just like TF2 wasn't made to be Prop Hunt. You can certainly force these games to function that way, that much is obvious, but does that dictate its appropriateness as an official edition? Absolutely not. I understand that modern game development practices forego all sense of uniqueness in favor of trying to appeal to as many people as possible with toys and grade school activities, but don't let this happen to TF2. Do not bastardize this game even further by turning it into something it isn't. It's already there. Don't make it worse. This continued uncritical acceptance of these VScript game modes will be seriously destructive to the game's ecosystem. It will hurt the game in the long run by further diluting TF2 with bloat, trying to appeal to a wider and wider group of people who weren't interested in the game in the first place. That's why they went and made their own games in community servers, or went to go play elsewhere. They didn't want to play TF2. Prop Hunt has zero business being officially added, holiday restricted or otherwise. Period. Eric Smith, please do not add this. But mark my fucking words, we're gonna get at least 8 new maps for Christmas, including Prop Hunt. Balls rolling on that bloat, and there's no signs of stopping. I want to be wrong. I so desperately want to be wrong, but I know I won't be. And I've seen other horrifically stupid arguments in favor of adding Prop Hunt. Oh well, we already have Man vs. Machine, and that's basically a different game. You're still the mercenaries shooting at robot mercenaries. At the very least, everything is still there. All the classes, all the guns. Man vs. Machine was Valve dabbling with PvE that required heavy modifications to the base game and custom balancing in order to work properly. Which is why they stopped making new content for it after what, 2 years? And yeah, sure, it's fun and has earned its place as the long since dead staple of this game, but PvE wasn't even established yet in TF2, and the PvP was already established as the team and class-based first-person shooter centered around territory control and defense. Oh, well, we already have other wacky game modes like Pastime and Manpower. Yeah, therefore Prop Hunt's okay. Well, these game modes also still resemble the vanilla game in the exact same capacity. Territory control and defense with teams and classes, and everything remains intact. You got Manpower, which is just capture the flag, but with grappling hooks and abilities. You have Pastime, which is also capture the flag, but passing around the flag and throwing it into a goal via jump pads. Everything is still there. You're not stripping anything away, stuff is being added. But guess what? Even these two game modes were such extreme deviations from the vanilla game that they ended up dead. Manpower died long before Meet Your Match came out, and then Pastime died off even more quickly. After their novelty wore off, everyone returned to the game that they came for in the first place. The same thing happened with Versus Saxon Hale. The same thing's gonna happen with Zombie Infection. The same thing happened years ago with Prop Hunt inside of community servers. Revitalizing that dead game mode with VScript will only repeat the same vicious fucking cycle of implementation and subsequent abandonment, as real fans of the game stick to the real game, and passive enjoyers fuck off and go back to whatever else they enjoyed before that. Oh well, if it's holiday restricted, then that's fine. We already have a bunch of other wacky stuff, and that's okay for Scream Fortress. Prop Hunt is fine for Smithsmith too. You could maybe make an argument for Prop Hunt being a Scream Fortress gimmick after the round ends or something, but not the full gameplay itself, and certainly not for Christmas. Scream Fortress has always traditionally been the same base game, with gimmicks and tweaks layered on top, and not a new game entirely. Every single Scream Fortress map functions at this bare minimum level. Aside from zombie infection, the first ever violation to this rule, which in my opinion needs to stop. Well, if you don't like Prop Hunt, don't play it. Don't play Prop Hunt. You choose what maps you queue for. It's new content, therefore it must be good. You just hate updates, don't you? You want TF2, yeah, you clearly want TF2 to die. The game is old, people like it, just let it happen. Who cares about preserving the nature of the game? We want more toys. No. How about you fuck off and go play a different game? Because that's clearly what you're looking for. Just because something is free and new doesn't make it okay for the game. And now listen, I'm totally fine with brand new game modes. VScript is an amazingly powerful tool. But again, if you're making new game modes for TF2, whatever you create should at least loosely resemble the base game. Perks? Fine. Slime with its fish people? Great. This new Krampus map that built a brand new boss from the ground up with all new original modeling and coding? That's fucking fantastic. These all still resemble the base game, with new additions or embellishments layered on top. The mercenaries are all still present in the team and class-based first-person shooter centered around territory control and defense. When VScript is used to embellish this fact, it is totally fine. But Prop Hunt? Minigames? This isn't TF2 branching out for something fresh, it's being a different game. Stop. I say no thanks, not interested to VScript Prop Hunt in the vanilla game. Keep that shit in community servers or go play fucking Garry's mod. Good game mode.
Very skill based.
Listen,
I just increased the player limit.
Listen, I understand that I am an embittered individual. I tend to have a negative outlook on things, but when I say that this is objectively bad and should not be in the game, I mean that with the utmost sincerity. Do not put this in the vanilla game. My God.
Like, I think it's silly, but this should not be in casual.